Some Anaheim parents want to make their neighborhood school a charter school. One problem, the Anaheim school board's against it, and they're fighting the parents and their backers in court. What's at stake in the battle over Palm Lane Elementary? That's next on Inside OC. Inside OC is brought to you by 5 Point. 5 Point is an independent real estate development company with assets under management across California. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming. Hi, I'm Rick Reiff. Welcome to Inside OC. The charter school movement is growing across America and especially in California. Over the past 10 years, the number of charter schools has more than doubled in the state to more than 1,100, most in the country. More than 500,000 kids now attend charters in California. That's nearly 10% of total public school enrollment. And charter advocates want to grow much more. But as they grow, the charter school movement is running into often fierce opposition from teachers' unions and some local school boards. That's certainly the case in Anaheim, where the school board is fighting a bid by a group of parents to turn their neighborhood school, Palm Lane Elementary, into a charter. So what are the issues? What's at stake? Well, here to discuss, Gloria Romero. She's former Democratic State Senate Majority Leader, founder of the California Center for Parent Empowerment, and she's co-founder and CEO of a new school, Scholarship Prep Charter School in Santa Ana. Also here, Jose Moreno. He's a candidate for Anaheim City Council, professor of Chicano and Latino Studies at Cal State Long Beach, and until recently, president of the Anaheim City Board of Education. Welcome, Gloria and Jose.
Thank you.
So just to start, because I think there's probably some confusion among viewers out there, Gloria, what is a charter school? How does it differ from a public school or a private school?
Charter schools are public schools. This is been the law in California and the nation for 25 years, a quarter of a century. In fact, California was the second state in the nation to pass legislation authorizing the establishment of independent public charter schools. They have grown in popularity, parental demand. There are extensive waiting lists, and it speaks to the understanding that ultimately, philosophically, parents should have the right to be able to vote with their feet, to choose the best school that fits their needs. Charters often a great deal of innovation. They are freed from some more stringent parts of the education code, and ultimately that produces greater opportunities for learning for many children in California.
So a lot of what you say there, I think some people have in their mind, well, that sounds like a private school. But you say it's a public school.
Charter schools are public schools. These are not private schools. And what is important there is, look, if you're rich, you can go anywhere you want. But if you are poor or you're middle class, you are oftentimes stuck. Even when the state of California identifies your neighborhood school as a chronically, academically underperforming school, you're stuck because you are automatically zoned by zip code. A charter school gives parents choice.
So one difference, charter school, there's no tuition. It's just like a public school.
It's a free public school.
So anything in that explanation that you'd like to amplify on or give a little different interpretation to?
Sure, and thank you for the invitation to be here, Gloria. It's great to see you. I think it's better said charter schools are public schools with public dollars that are privately managed. That is, that the folks who come in to run charter schools are not folks who are elected by parents. The board of directors of charter schools are not elected by parents. It's often the case that parents don't even have a representative on these board of directors of charter schools. So I think it's more appropriate to say that charter schools are public schools using public monies in public buildings funded by the public taxpayer, run by a private management organization.
Can that private management organization do things in that school that you don't do? In other words, as far as how they operate, Gloria mentioned They have more leeway. What are some of the differences between a charter school and your traditional public school?
Well, the promise of charter schools, based on the 1992 law that was put forth by Gary Hart, a Democrat in the California legislature, was that these would be innovative spaces of innovation and labs for our public education system to learn from, of how the legislature, local school boards, teachers, and others can learn how we best educate our children moving into the 21st century. So they were supposed to be really labs of innovation, not to become the norm of our education system.
One of the sticking points, I mentioned opposition from the teachers' unions. Most, I don't think all, but most charter schools do not have they don't have the teachers' union, or the work rules are different. Explain that.
Well, part of what charters are released from is a lot of state regulations and state codes. So these are really deregulated, privately managed schools is what they are. And so we've seen that over the past 20 years, when you deregulate particular spaces, there's a lot of red herrings and a lot of things that we have to be worried about as those who are entrusted with public education. So the thing about charter schools is that they're allowed, they're held to the standards as public schools are, but they're allowed to get to those standards however they deem most appropriate, which is why they're supposed to be labs of innovation. Public schools are not allowed to do that. Public schools have to work by a curriculum that's imposed on and determined by the State Board of Education.
Okay, and I think we could probably continue this conversation, and I do want to get back to it because
Yes.
there's a lot of issues here that I'm sure both of you want to address. But just so we get the discussion of Palm Lane going, and maybe we'll cover all these other topics too about the merits or demerits of charter schools and traditional public schools. But let's get into Palm Lane Elementary. Gloria, explain what's going on there.
This is fascinating. This is a case where it's not only some Anaheim parents, this was essentially a supermajority. Approximately 64% of parents at Palm Lane Elementary School, located in the shadow of Disneyland, who basically came together and understood, after petitioning their own local school board for change, to bring back a beloved principal who was enacting changes on behalf of their children. The parents there predominantly Latino. These are predominantly Spanish-speaking parents. These are poor parents. They too believe and understand education is the key to the American dream. They were denied. The school board refused to make any changes at that school. The state of California recognized Palm Lane Elementary as a school that's eligible for academic transformation because of its chronically low numbers in terms of performance. Parents organized, actually under the law that I had written while I was in the legislature, the Parent Empowerment Act, and they successfully were able to use the law to petition to restart their school as a charter school. Rather than the board accepting this, the superintendent and the board actually sued their own parents for using the law. It went to court. I was in trial every day. I listened to the testimony. At the end of the day, it was quite clear the judge ruled quite strongly on behalf of these parents that they had the right to use the law, and that the school had used rather nefarious methods to try to undermine the parents' efforts.
Okay, well, let's hold it there, because I do want to go to the next step, how we're getting to where we are now. But Jose, in that whole thing, I think you had already you were at that point the former president when the actual case went to court, but you had certainly been involved in the process before then. So what's your take on all this?
When the petition was served, I was no longer on the board. I believe it was December or January. But I think, again, it's certainly, I think, a limited understanding of what's going on at Palm Lane, as well as our public schools. Parents were upset about a principal being displaced at the school. In fact, the principal was investigated through complaints that were submitted to us by parents and staff at the school. So parents used their rights to complain and ask for a formal investigation of someone at their school site. So the school board did its due diligence. By law, anyone who submits a uniform complaint procedure, we're supposed to follow that up, which is what Gloria exactly talks about as parent empowerment. So through an independent investigation, the superintendent recommended that the principal should be removed.
I'm getting two different realities here. I've got a beloved principal, and I've got, it sounds almost like a criminal principal here. So what's...
I won't use that term criminal. Okay. It's that there were complaints filed by
right.
members of the Palm
not
Lane
a very
community.
Good principal, okay? A great principal and a bad principal, okay? That's kind of the image here.
But irrespective of that, though, it's not so much about that was the impetus for action. The bottom line, though, is that the parents, who ultimately, I believe parents should be the architects of their own children's future. These are our children. They don't belong to a school board. They don't belong to a district. They're not a debit card where the district says, if you go to a different school, we lose money. These are parents' rights. This is about the children. So irrespective, we may have a difference of opinion on the principle, but ultimately the parents used California law as they were legally entitled to petition for a change. That's what they were successful in. That's what they
was this
want.
underperforming? Was this a school that needed change?
Well, let me just say that we actually encourage every year we send out letters to parents about their rights as parents to choose to enroll their children in any school that they feel is appropriate for their child. The question is, does the school that they pick to go to, does it have capacity? Is there room? In fact, we have a number of families who take their children to other districts for other reasons. It's not simply because a school's not doing well. Another school in another district may be closer to their work and may be closer to their daycare. So we actually do very much, and I believe still do, I should say, we did at the time. But certainly our public school system values the Open Enrollment Act that I think Gloria was a part of, to make sure that parents have choices that they can go to.
Well, I'm just wondering, in a case like Palm Lane, and I heard you talk about your concern about the private control and that you don't feel there's as much accountability. But at some point, don't you say, boy, this school, I mean, let's try something else. Let's take a shot here. Let's see how it works as a charter. I mean, it almost sounds like you don't like that idea.
No, the question isn't whether I like the idea, it's the law. So if parents exercise their right, and I believe, again, when I was president of the board, and the board has always looked out for making sure that we did our due diligence whenever any parents bring a complaint forth. In fact, parents came to several board meetings, and as president of the board, actually expanded the agenda to make sure that they're fully heard, expanded the number of minutes that they're allowed to speak so that we heard exactly their concerns. We couldn't explain why we removed the principal because that's a personnel matter that's under state law we can't share. We just simply said, we want to engage with you of searching for a new principal that will really make a difference for you. So we were in the midst of change. In fact, the school itself had already turned over 1/3 of its teachers. So is it an underperforming school? Well, based on the measures that the state certainly imposed, it certainly could be argued that. But was it an improving school? Absolutely. In fact, when I started on the board in 2006, Palm Lane was ranked as a number 3 school in similar school rankings, school similar to its demography. By the time the petition came, it was ranked the 7 to 10, 10 being the highest. So it was certainly a school that was on the move. It had gone from an API, which is something that Gloria seems to value, test scores. API is the Academic Performing Index, and something that Gloria certainly values, it seems, to this effort, by the way she wrote the law, is that test scores are the end-all, be-all of a school in terms of its quality, which educators and educational researchers have profoundly said that's not the best measure of a quality school. But it's an easy way to either identify a school one way or the other. So the API score for Palm Lane in 2005 was 629. By 2012, it was 771. It increased by 142 points. So it was certainly a school that was on the move, and we were looking to make it even better.
But if I can interject, but it's on the move, but again, at whose pace? The target in California is 800. By any number, 741 is far below. So yes, of course, too, we can always go back, in the comfort zone of, the bureaucracy and say, well, it's on the move. It's making progress. It's sort of what I say, the mañana system. Tomorrow, your school will improve. Parents have one shot to ensure that their school, for which they are paying taxes for, to educate their children, that this school succeeds. And I think more and more, as we understood, that parents were saying, I can't afford to wait. If my child's not reading by age 9, statistics clearly show that we are going to fall far behind. And that's what motivated parents. All too often you hear that stereotype, oh, Latino parents don't care about their schools. I've never believed that. I know my mother, I'm sure probably your parents as well, fought for education rights for us. And I saw in these Palm Lane parents, led by Cecilia Ochoa and many of the other parents, they said when they stood up to actually take responsibility and say, we're going to use a law to transform a school to make sure our kids have a good quality school in which to be educated, then they were sued by their school district. That to me is, the fantasy story in the shadow of Disneyland. It's incredulous.
Well, with all due respect, you mentioned the bureaucracy. That's one that you oversaw as the Senate Education Committee Chair. You were in the legislature for for a number of years.
And that's why I wrote the laws,
in
to
fact,
cut through the bureaucracy.
And what you did was you defined quality on one test score. And we all know, all research, there's consensus in the research that low-income children, children of English learners, who are English learners, will often on these measures, standardized measures, fare well regardless. There will always be exceptions to the rule, so there will be some success. But nonetheless, what we need to be thinking about, as we were doing in Anaheim City School District, is saying in this age of a No Child Left Behind, where people like Gloria and the legislature were narrowing what gets defined as school quality, we're saying we know that children's creativity, their collaborative abilities, the ability to think outside the box and to engage in the world is really about the arts, music, math, social studies, history, civic engagement. And that's what we wanted to do. We didn't want to pay attention to a test score
The
as
irony,
the quality.
though, is that,
and as we,
Jose,
if I could just finish.
But the law was mirrored on federal law.
And as we engage
with
with families about that process, that's something we did hear a lot from parents. They didn't want just a test score. They didn't want a narrowed down of the curriculum. In fact, I'm sure you're familiar with this literature. People called this era of standardized testing that you actually created the law around, the pedagogy of poverty. That is, poor schools are then doubling down on math and reading to the detriment of the arts and creativity and the intellectual development of the child and the spiritual and cultural development of the child. That's the law that you created. And so parents don't want that. Parents want a full education for their children. That's what we were providing.
I think parents want to choose their educational options. And that's what the Palm Lane parents did, to bring it back to this. I believe in the arts, I believe in the sciences, all of this. But at the end of the day, we do have standards in the nation, in California, your own school board as well, or your former school board. Ultimately, though, we can take a look and say, do parents have the right to make a choice? What is amazing to me is that where else in America do we say that people are restricted by zip code? Imagine if you couldn't worship at the church of your choice. Imagine if you couldn't go to a public park because there would be somebody at the entrance saying, oh, wait a minute, you live in this zip code, you can't come in. You can choose your dentist, your doctor, you can go to any shopping mall. I can buy a home in whatever. We struck down racially restricted covenants decades ago, but only do we have this zip code on schools. And even when a school is deemed as chronically, not just 1 year or 2 years, but chronically underperforming, we tell the parent basically, golly gee, too bad, you got to stay there. These parents use the law to say there's no more mañana or tomorrow. We want change now. And we know that if children are not reading, they are not going to be performing well in other aspects of life. Okay. That's the underlying issue.
So let's pick up, let's go back to the chronology. We'll get back, but let's go back to the chronology of Palm Lane, because I think you put us into the court where the school board sued, and now it's in court, and the judge was siding with the parents. So what's happened since then?
Well, since then, the Anaheim City School Board has authorized close to $1 million to continue fighting their losing cause. It is in the appellate court right now. There, in fact, is a secondary civil rights lawsuit that was filed against the district. In fact, on that secondary lawsuit, there have been efforts to mediate that, and that may be more promising. But ultimately, the main case itself is in the appellate court, where we believe, given the power of the testimony and the evidence that was entered into the court and the soundness of an independent judge's ruling, I believe that the parents will prevail. But here's the sad thing. They will have lost at least 2 years out of the educational lives of their children, and the Anaheim parents who paid the taxes for the Anaheim City School District will be out at least $1 million, if not more, because the tab keeps going up while they go into appeal in the appellate.
Those parents can't afford the $1 million, right? There must be other.
It comes out of taxpayers. No. This all comes out of. Okay. No, this is as a public school district, the Anaheim City School. Rather than investing $1 million into the arts and education and field trips and quality teachers and retraining, they're putting it into lawyers and fighting.
Yeah, Jose, it does sound kind of striking. I mean, even if you're right, I mean, you feel strongly about it. At some point, don't you say, "Gee, how much are we going to spend on this? We lost this one."
Well, I think you went a little too far ahead of the game. Yeah. For about 8 to 9 months, when parents were coming to us with a concern, which was initiated by the concern about the principal, as I mentioned, the school board was very open to engaging and wanted to engage the families, and in fact, we did. In fact, some of the plaintiffs, I spoke to them personally and said, what do we need to do? And they shared what needed to happen. We had a new principal. The principal was initiating new things. I went to open house the summer before the petition was filed. There were two parents there who were also part of the press conference when they filed the petition, who said to the principal in front of me that they were going to give that principal a year to see if she can make a difference at the school. 3 months later, we hear that there's petitions being driven and they're being pushed to do that. There is another element to this, which the school district, I believe, is contending, which certainly I saw for myself as a board member, is that when we were hearing from parents, is we were hearing that they were being bullied into signing these petitions. They were being misled into signing these petitions. In fact, many of the parents who are Spanish dominant came to me and said that they were asked to sign a petition in English with no Spanish translation to it.
But all of that was debunked in court. You can read the trial transcripts. Well, I don't think you were ever there one day. I sat through every day of testimony.
But
there were allegations, but there was never any evidence, and the judge found that not to be credible.
Well, since you value parents' voices, that's the voices I heard directly from parents.
And 64% of the parents of Palm Lane wrote the petition. They signed the petition.
They signed them, but many of them were invalidated. In fact, it was only by 12 parents that the petition was agreed that it was 50%. But here's a larger issue about what's happening at Palm Lane and really the charter movement. It's about local control. This should concern both conservatives and progressive people across the aisle.
And see, I would argue it's about parent control. He's arguing for local control. I'm arguing for
parents are local.
It's about parents.
Parents are local.
It's about parents' rights.
But here's the issue that comes up for me I'm also a parent. You forgot the introduction. I'm a parent of the school system, of which you're arguing that we're going to lose $1 million. So local control is this. Gloria's law says 51% of parents, if they sign a petition, now have the right to turn the school over into a charter school, and they have to name it as such in the petition. That means 49% of parents, which was the case at Palm Lane Elementary, did not sign that petition. It means they did not have a say in what happens to the school. In fact, the law is very clear. 49% of parents are systematically, legally disenfranchised by Gloria's law because they now cannot participate in which charter school will come in, whether they should go to a charter school, who'll be the person to put out the application for charter schools. So in fact, you argue on one hand that this is a law about local control for parents and parent empowerment, but 49% of the parents are systematically left out of that conversation.
But let me address that, because first of all, it's not my law, it's actually California's law.
Well, you keep saying you wrote the law.
Well,
so
I did, I wrote the law, but
right.
It's California's law. But think about it in this sense. If we're saying that, to a sense, then you would be refuting even democracy itself. We find that, for example, in the or on a school board, it's a majority vote. If you get to a majority with elections coming up, the country is split, do we then say whoever wins, if they're at 50% plus one, that's the vote. It's democracy. As Bernie Sanders said, democracy is messy. That's true. It doesn't mean that others are disenfranchised. It means it's a minority position. Okay. But I will say, when Jose Moreno actually filed the lawsuit against the city of Anaheim for actually a suit that I supported in terms of moving from at-large to district elections, one of the arguments that he used for changing to district elections was talking about the political disenfranchisement and disempowerment of especially Latino voters. He based a good part of that argument on the failed quality of the schools in Anaheim. Palm Lane was one. So I think, again, too, in looking at it, we've got to understand there are consequences to communities, to states, to democracies. When you have a failed educational system or failing schools and they're just left to languish, we are going to find, unfortunately, in the future, you will find the disempowerment on which you based your lawsuit.
We're almost out of time, and I'm sorry to cut off this line of discussion. But Jose, you are a party to a claim that's been filed with the California Board of Education that you want the state of California to investigate another group of charter schools, Magnolia Charter Schools, because they have some involvement in white collar or in crime and in Turkey or something. And you've been criticized in some quarters for getting involved in Turkish politics. So what's going on there? What's your complaint?
Thank you for bringing that topic up. I'm actually quite disappointed that we're here discussing parent empowerment under the law and the rules and procedures of the state to allow parents to file complaints. And Gloria actually attacked me in an op-ed for having done so as a parent. The concern with this is that Magnolia Charter Academies are, we believe, based on evidence that we've seen and we reviewed, are tied to a larger charter management organization that's tied to a cleric that's part of what's called the Gulen movement. And what we're concerned about is that charter academy, which is the largest in the nation that this person runs, a lot of those tax dollars that are supposed to be used here for our schools are being siphoned off into foreign affairs. So it's not that we're getting involved in Turkey politics. Turkish politics is that our public tax dollars for education are being siphoned off from our public school system in a for-profit system and then used for foreign affairs to battle a war or a revolution in Turkey. That's our concern.
And unfortunately, we're out of time. We do have an open mic segment, and I encourage viewers to go to that, because I think we'll continue this discussion briefly, because it's
but
kind
let me
of
also say,
Paul
Main is now by the way, Paul Main is now a gold ribbon school on parent engagement. So you asked what happened to Paul Main.
And
it's
the
now a
parents
state
object
recognized
to them
school.
being used in photographs to show that they were engaged.
Okay, all right. Well, that's it for now. And again, thanks to my guests. I wish we could go on. Gloria Romero and Jose Moreno. You can watch this show and past shows by going to pbssocal.org or rickreiff.com, or catch our shows and our post-show open mic chatter on YouTube, and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again on Inside OC. Inside OC is brought to you by 5 Point. 5 Point is an independent real estate development company with assets under management across California. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming.